What we'll focus on today is setting financial priorities, spending, saving, and budgeting, and then dealing with debt. So setting financial priorities and goals. You know, the start of a new year, it's always the same old story. We all get into our resolutions and start planning for what's to come in the year ahead. Some of those resolutions may be non-monetary, or we often think that they're non-monetary. Most things do end up linking back to money, though, in some way, shape, or form. And so in setting those resolutions or those goals for the year, it's really important to evaluate, kind of the who, what, where, why, when, how, and going through that full process. Looking at, really why is the goal important to you? If it's not something that you intrinsically want and you're doing for your own advancement, then you're less likely to really follow through with it. If it's not directly something that's going to really make you want to hop out of bed every day and hit the ground running to accomplish it. You also want to look at whether the goal is realistic for you or not. Sometimes I think we might really set out to accomplish a really big goal when we might want to start with, smaller kind of baby steps in reaching that goal. So you might want to break your goal down if it seems like it might be a little too big. If you're going from, a small apartment where you're saving, sharing with 3 other roommates or something like that, and then you want to jump into home ownership, you really have to evaluate whether it makes sense given your current circumstances, whether your current situation is allowing you to save the money that you need to save in order to be able to budget appropriately for home ownership. And it's always worthwhile to, take that first step and have a discussion and kind of go through those financial details so that you really know what you're facing. Otherwise, you might want to look at, going from maybe having 3 roommates down to having 1 roommate and seeing if you can make that work for a period of time. And again, it might not always be super financially focused, but the ultimate goal might be, I want to live on my own and have my own home. And there, of course, will be a monetary aspect in achieving that. How will you track your progress toward the goal? Having milestones along the way is something that will help keep you on track. And, when you can break down a goal a little bit by setting those milestones, then it's also going to be something that makes it that much easier to keep you on track. What's your time frame for achieving the goal? Again, I think that ties back to whether or not it's realistic. If you set a goal for 3 months, when realistically it might be a 9 to 12 month goal, and it might take you a little extra work to get there. So it's just evaluating those core details. Do you need any help in accomplishing the goal that you've set out to do? There are some goals that, we might be solely focused on, when we're talking about exercise, weight loss, muscle gain, things like that. Those are things that, to a degree, I think we all have, control over and enough capacity, but then other people might go out and hire a personal trainer to help them accomplish that goal that they're looking at, because there's some things that we just, regardless of whether we feel that we're equipped with the tools to do it, we might not necessarily go about it in really the right way that's going to help us accomplish it. So regardless of what the goal is, there typically is always a resource that might help you in accomplishing that goal. And it may be very much worthwhile in, reaching out to one of those resources to help you get there. And then celebrating accomplishments along the way. I think that's a huge piece of it, where we, when you're not finding joy in achieving a goal or the steps that it takes to get there, it's really easy to kind of fall out of it and say, well, that goal maybe next year. So setting little milestones and celebrations around those milestones is very helpful, whether it's rewarding yourself with a dinner out or a fun event with friends, or a cheat day along the way or something like that. You have to have something that really motivates you to keep going, and also celebrates the small accomplishments along the way. And just a few New Year's resolutions, buy a new car. Sometimes that might be on the agenda. Travel more. It's not entirely money related, but of course it does take money in order to travel. So that's something to think about. Going back to school or going to school in the first place. That's something, again, not directly money related, but you do have to think of, what are the costs to do it? Do you have opportunities to possibly have your tuition paid for either by your employer or through other assistance programs, or relying on student loans? And then also, while you're in school, are you able to work full time? Are you able to bring in the income that you need to sustain the rest of your lifestyle? Purchasing a new home or getting into a new rental, either or. Doesn't have to be ownership, but whether you're living with family currently and maybe need to get out on your own in some capacity, those are all different approaches to that. And then if you look at changing jobs, a lot of people, especially post-pandemic, have realized that perhaps the career that they've been in maybe wasn't the best fit for them, or just really doesn't fully embrace or embody your dreams and what you see for your future. So people might make the switch from a regular wage employment situation to self-employment. And what does it take to get there? If you want to go work for yourself, there's a lot of steps that you really want to take in the right order before you make that switch, because once you make the switch, it's a lot harder to go out and get vehicle loans or get a mortgage loan or do any of those other things. So all things worth considering, and we'll let Nicole get into the next piece here.
Thank you. Spending, saving, and budgeting. So it kind of goes hand in hand with what Chelsea just talked about with goals. So in order to sort of figure out financial goals, you do have to, have the ability to evaluate spending, saving, and your budgeting. These are all really important. And, by tracking your income and spending, as well as your savings, you'll learn, where you need to readjust. And I always like to say that saving, spending, and budgeting is kind of like a work in progress all the time. So things come up in life where you might have to change, what you're saving or what you're budgeting. So it's always good to just reevaluate that from time to time and often. And when we talk about budgeting, we talk about our needs versus our wants, which is important. And I think a good way to think about it is with this 50-30-20 rule. So it's just a guideline, but I think it's good. 50% of your income to needs. So that would be falling under, housing, transportation, food, etc. 30% to wants. So that would be something that you might be your goal to saving for something that you might want. Maybe it's a new pair of shoes or something that's not necessarily a necessity. And then 20% to savings. So that's just a good guideline for when we talk about budgeting and getting our savings jump started. I think, when you sit down and you think about a budget, I think that sometimes, there's a lot of programs out there online or apps that you can use to help with a budget. To me, sometimes it's actually better to do it the old school way and actually, sit down and write out your budget. I do that personally. I am sort of like, I need to see it on paper. I'll put, my income and then all the bills that I need to pay, the necessities. And then from there, it's all written out and I can easily adjust it or see where my money is going. Sometimes even printing or looking at statements that you have with your bank account is really helpful when budgeting. I know that, little habits of like going and getting a coffee every day, those add up very quickly. And before I know it, I've spent like $60 on coffee. So it kind of gives you that idea of where is my money going? And, what can I do to change some of what I'm spending? So creating a budget or a spending plan is number one. Number two, using your credit responsibly. So that would be, making sure that you're making your payments on time, not overusing credit cards for things that might be a want versus a need. Making sure you repay your debts on time, and then of course planning for your future. So that plan for the future piece really comes down to retirement accounts, making sure, that if your company that you work for allows you to put a certain percentage into your retirement and then they'll match that, really making sure that you're getting the most of your money, and planning for that future is really important. At the credit union here, and I know a lot of institutions do this, they have sub accounts, which I think are really helpful when we talk about budgeting. So basically, you can set up a separate savings account from your regular savings that you might use. You can label them whatever you're saving for. And then you can even have it automated. So every week or every 2 weeks, however you get paid, you can have a certain amount going into those sub accounts. And then it's just a separate savings to then have saved for something that you might be saving for the future. And I like that because it kind of keeps it all separated within your account and it's easy to see and sometimes harder to get to, which is the big thing with savings is, we have savings accounts, but it's easily dipped into. So having a separate account for those items that you might be saving for, is really helpful. The other thing that I think is great to think about is everybody people I've worked with in the past that may have had a car loan and they're paying, say, $400 a month towards their car loan, and then their car loan gets paid off. They're still putting that $400 aside into a savings account, because they're already used to paying that bill. And at the end of, maybe they need a new car, and then in the future, they have a pretty good chunk of money set aside for a down payment on a new car because they're continuing to put that money aside into a savings account. So I think once you get used to that, it's helpful if you continue it, which is good. And then the budget item graph here, I think is good too to see visually that mortgage and housing, 30 to 40% from your income. It shouldn't be any more than that. Transportation, 10 to 15% of your income should be put towards transportation. And then other living expenses, that would include, groceries, and anything else, I guess CMP or internet, things like that would be part of the 35 to 45% target. Credit cards and then other loan payments that you might have should be no more than 0 to 10%. And then savings and investment, which is the 401k or the retirement account, should be 10 to 15% of your income allocated to those items. So I think that's a good, sort of guideline for when you're setting a budget to see where things are going, how much I should put aside for these particular items. And then it's a good way to transition into being able to start saving additionally into your own savings account as well.
All right, so dealing with debt, we've talked about setting goals, we've talked about budgets. So now we're going to talk more about your debt. So I am going to go over some strategies and just some steps to start helping you get out of debt. So some of the first steps when talking with members We'll go over the first step is just knowing where you stand with your debt. As Nicole and both Chelsea had mentioned, just looking at your budget, sitting down with someone, even looking at your credit report, know where you stand. Many times I've talked to members and we're wanting to know how much you have left on your car loan, how many credit cards do you have out there, and they really don't have an idea. So really just sitting down, doing a budget, looking at your credit, what do you have left on some credit cards? Do you know how much you're paying an interest rate on some of these credit cards? Looking at the big financial picture is a really good step when you're looking at dealing with debt. The second step I'd say would be avoid accumulating more debt if you can. So the key to stop is to stop adding to your debt. So stop moving that goalpost further and further down the line. If you've set a goal to cut down on your credit cards, that would be probably the easiest way and the quickest way to stop accumulating more debt. Stop reaching, if you're reaching for those credit cards, those everyday purchases, trying to put that away and using the money that is in your checking account. The third step would be reducing those expenses. Really, again, it all goes back to the budget, taking a really hard look at that budget, finding areas where you can save, even if it's just a little. Like Nicole had mentioned, that coffee purchase every day can add up. So can you make a small change? Instead of getting one every day, can you cut down to maybe 3 times a week and eventually maybe no times and you're making coffee at home? Another big thing, and I talked with just a member today, is those TV subscriptions is another small change. All of us have those. Sometimes you have multiple that you haven't even watched on that for a while. So can you cut that down and save a little bit? We were able to save this member $50 today because he had multiple and was paying double on them. So just think of that. Is there some place in your budget that you can reduce those expenses and have that add up? And the fourth step would be to pay more than the minimum. So once you have some extra money in your budget, can you add a little bit towards your monthly payment? Can you round up? If your payment is $215, do you have room in your budget to roll it up to maybe $250? It will start to add up and you can start paying down that debt faster. Another recommendation that we'll say to members, if you get paid weekly, bi-weekly, set those up on auto pays. When you have an extra pay period that month, it's going to start paying that down quicker. And then overall, you're going to be paying less interest on those loans. So some strategies to pay down that debt after you've really gone over, again, all the steps we just talked about. Some strategies to start paying down that debt. The first one would be a snowball method. So if you think about a snowball going down a hill, it's going to start smaller and get bigger as it goes down. So with this method, you're going to focus on paying off your smallest debt first, and then going down the line, what you were paying on that first small debt, you're going to add to the next debt, and so on and so forth. This is really great if you have a lot of small debts. Maybe you have some small credit cards, some small medical bills. You just really want to clean that up. This would be really helpful to just start paying that small balance and then adding on to the next debt until they're all paid. The next method would be the avalanche method. So if you think of an avalanche, it starts with the big things first and then works its way down. So with this one, you're going to focus on debts paying the highest interest rate first and then working your way down to the smallest interest rate. This is a great method to use if you have a lot of credit cards out there with those high interest rates. Maybe you took out a credit card that was no interest, 0% interest for the first 12 months, and you just weren't able to pay it off in that 12 months, it has that high interest rate, trying to focus on that one first, and then again, working your way down. Another strategy would just be negotiating with your creditors. So if you can't afford your minimum payment, even after doing all those things we talked about, you're setting a goal, you're trying to simplify your budget, and you just can't seem to still get ahead, sit down with your local credit union, your creditors, and see what they're able to offer you. Many times we have members that come to us and we're able to lower their payment, even a temporary lower payment if you really don't want to extend out your debt further. If you've gone from 2 incomes to 1, sometimes with a divorce that's hard to adjust to, what can we do to help you? Sometimes they're also able to offer you a settlement if you're just trying to clear up small debts that have been out there for a while. Deferments is another great option. You just need a few months to get back on track. There's definitely different ways that credit unions and your financial institution can help you with that. And the last one would be a debt consolidation. So this option really allows you to just combine all your debts into one with ideally a lower payment, a lower interest rate. Many times we can help members with taking credit card debt, personal loan debt, rolling that into an auto loan that may have some equity, or maybe it's an auto loan that's paid off. You can use that as collateral. Or maybe you have a home that you do have some equity in, taking out a home equity loan, getting all that credit card, personal loan debt into one monthly payment, getting it paid down faster with a lower interest rate. Just exploring different strategies that may work for you. You may try the snowball method and that's just not working, and you want to sit down with your financial institution. Just really trying what works for you is the best way to start tackling it.
During, the stronger rate environments, we deal with a lot of refinance transactions where people might be consolidating non-mortgage debt, but into a mortgage because they have the equity to work with in their home. And oftentimes, I'd pull someone's credit report and, it might have 10 different credit cards on it that they've just used, maybe don't have huge balances on them, but they're just all spread out. And obviously, that's one of the things that we love, I love personally at the credit union is that, I log into my online banking and I have literally everything right in one spot. And to be able to manage, my credit card, my vehicle payment, my mortgage, my home equity, all of those things right through my online banking, and not having to chase it around and find my different logins for different accounts certainly makes things easier. But then, of course, we do, I think, largely most of us will have some different credit card accounts with other creditors for different store rewards or vacation rewards or things of that nature. And so people, get kind of spread out and then they're not paying attention to the statements. You might have everything on auto pay, so it just kind of goes and you don't really review those statements every month. And then all of a sudden you look and you're like, wow, they're charging me 27% interest on this. And I've been making, nominal payments on it. So certainly looking at what you've got out there, trying to pull and actually physically look at each of your credit card statements and identifying what those interest rates are at. You certainly want to focus on getting rid of the higher interest accrual debt first. We've had some people, I actually just spoke with someone this morning who, she's got an auto loan at like 3%, but was talking about possibly consolidating everything under her home equity. And I was like, well, that might not make the most sense if it may or it may not. It depends kind of on what your goals are again, and whether, having it all lumped together will just make it easier for you to manage. But at the same time, you want to evaluate whether it's really the wisest move, because it might end up costing you more money in interest if you put it in a different loan product. So all things to consider, but
I know we push budget, but if you really sit down, we have a great detailed budget sheet on our website. Sometimes it's really hard to even just get started to sit down and do that, but I push members a lot to do it. Trying to build up that 3 to 6 month savings is awesome. And sometimes there isn't some places for you to cut it, but maybe if we can sit down and look at it with you, there's sometimes when you're staring at, or maybe there's transactions that you don't realize something is pulling out from your account that you totally forgot about. Looking at your transactions and comparing your budget, seeing is there something we can change, or maybe looking at a debt consolidation as well. But I think using your resources like your local credit union or your financial institution to see what we can look at for you, and maybe we can find just something little that would then add up over time.
If you've got any specific questions about like your personal financial situation, or you wanted to explore how you can maybe address something that's on your mind, feel free to reach out to Chelsea, Nicole, or Brittany, and they'll be happy to chat with you about your own personal situation and how you can find some solutions.